Hi everybody, welcome. Tammy from Tammy's Homesteading Crafts. Today we are in the kitchen. We are going to be doing a cooking video slash what I do, how I use my rhubarb. If that is something that interests you, stick around. So before we get started, I just want to welcome all of you to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. For those of you who this might be the very first video that you're watching, this podcast or this YouTube channel does a lot of different types of videos. We have a knitting podcast. We do some gardening videos. We do some preserving videos. We dabble a little bit in cooking videos. We don't do a lot of cooking videos, but I show what I'm doing with the stuff that I make, that I preserve, and the stuff that I get from my garden. I will show a few videos here and there on cooking. And then we also do some knitting tutorials. We also have a knitting podcast where we show the knitted objects that we do, and I also, on the knitting podcast, is where I show all of the products that I make and have on my website. So if you guys have not considered subscribing to my channel, please do so. It does benefit me by you subscribing to my channel. Okay, so let's get into our cooking video. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the rhubarb. Rhubarb is one of those fruits that it kind of looks and reminds me of celery. It grows in a stalk. It's very tart and very chewy and stringy, where your celery can have the strings on it. Rhubarb is very similar to celery as far as the way it grows, but it is very tart. Usually when you make rhubarb, most people put rhubarb with another sweeter fruit so that it makes it a little bit sweeter and easier to eat. But there is a lot of people out there that like just straight rhubarb. And there's so much you can do with rhubarb. You can make strawberry rhubarb jam, pies, crisp, or you can just have regular strawberry jam, strawberry crisp, rhubarb crisp, rhubarb jam, rhubarb pie, rhubarb bread, muffins. There's a lot you can do with rhubarb. So I have a good decent sized patch of rhubarb in my garden, and I get quite a bit of rhubarb each year, and I don't always use it all from year to year. So I'm going to do, over this summer, I'm going to make a bunch of different rhubarb recipes, and maybe I will do another podcast showing some of the other ones that I make. But some of the ones that I'm going to do, of course, we are running low on our jam, and I need to start replenishing the jams that we have in our house. I am going to do a pineapple rhubarb jam because I have quite a bit of pineapple that I had juiced, and the pulp is very flavorful, still very sweet, and I froze it into 1/2-inch pucks in my freezer. So I have pucks of pineapple, so I figure I'm going to do a pineapple rhubarb jam, something different, try it, see if we like it. I won't make a huge batch of it, because if we don't like it, then we have a lot of it that we're not going to want to eat. Of course, I'm going to make some strawberry rhubarb jam, and just different things with the rhubarb. Today we are going to make a rhubarb bread. And I got the recipe from a friend of mine, and I'm going to actually add a few of my own personal touches to this bread. We like nuts in our bread, and this did not call for any nuts. And also, I like to put a glaze on the top of my bread, so when it comes out of the oven, I will put some sort of a glaze on the top of it so that it'll be even a little sweeter than what it is. Now, when you're cooking with rhubarb, one of the things that I've noticed that if I use brown sugar, I don't have to use as much sugar as I would as if I was using white sugar. For some reason, I don't know why. I don't know if it just makes the taste a little sweeter. I don't know, but I do know that when I'm cooking with rhubarb, I usually tend to use brown sugar instead of white sugar. That's just something to think about. I don't know if it says it in all the recipes to use brown sugar, or white sugar, I'm not sure, but I noticed that brown sugar does make it seem to be a little sweeter. So let me show you what I'm doing and how I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually make a double batch, which will give me 4 loaves. But we put our bread, when I say we, my husband never does any of the cooking, the baking. He does a lot of the cooking, but not the baking. When I do my breads, I try to put them into mini loaves because that way we can enjoy one loaf in a couple of days instead of having a big loaf out and not really eating all of it and throwing it away. So it gives it a lot less waste, and it also allows me to pull out a little loaf to give to people if I want to. I usually will try to do a baking section in the fall where I will use up most of my frozen fruits that I have over the summer and make them into loaves and give bread for Christmas and stuff like that. I try to do that a lot during the year to be able to use up some of the fruits that I have in the freezer. The other thing with rhubarb that I wanted to talk about, rhubarb is very easy to freeze. Basically, my rhubarb plant, I've had it for 3 years now. And of course, the first couple of years that you do rhubarb, you're not allowed to even pull any off of it. It has to really get a growth on the rhubarb. So when I learned to pull rhubarb, you're supposed to pull close to the root and try to pull as much of it, not the root out, but try to break it off at the base of the root so that, and you'll kind of hear it do like a pop thing when you pull it out. As long as you can do that, it will keep regrowing. Last year I had rhubarb up until October. I was still pulling rhubarb from my rhubarb plant. It just kept growing and growing and giving me more rhubarb. So I'd go out and I'd pull 4 or 5 or 6 pieces, and I just enough to cut it up and put it in a quart Ziploc bag, which is it's 4 cups when it fills the bag, but when it freezes and it thaws, you now have 2 cups. And most recipes call for 2 to 4 cups. So that allows me to know exactly how much I have to get out of the freezer when I go to do my rhubarb. Of course, once you freeze it and you thaw it, it is softer. It is a little easier to work with when it is soft, other than when it's fresh and it's stiff. It cooks a lot longer. It takes longer to break down when it cooks. When it is frozen and thawed, it is easier to cook. It's already soft, so it doesn't have to go through that stage of, cooking everything and trying to get it to break down and to be soft. It is already soft. Okay, so let me show you what I'm doing with the bread. Okay, so the first thing I did was put your eggs, your brown sugar, your oil, and your vanilla into the pan, into the bowl, and get it mixed. So I did mix that. The next thing is to put in your flour. Since we are doing a double batch, we need 3 cups of 6 cups of flour. So I will get that ready, and then I will show you how I mix, and also I'm going to get my spices ready, and I'll show you what I do with my spices to allow it to mix into things a little bit better. So with my spices, I'll usually put them in a little container and then just mix them together so that they are definitely mixed together, and then I will end up putting these in with my flour. I'll mix this in with my flour. That way I can get it mixed in well, and you don't get a pocket of spice in one area. This way it allows you to get it all mixed together and put it in with your flour, and then it mixes a whole lot better. That's been a good experience for me when I'm going to mix spices in, to be able to mix them in with the flour. And here I just dumped it into the flour, and then I'll just mix this in with the flour so that when I dump all this flour, this is half of the flour that I have. So this is 3 cups of flour, and I'm just going to mix these spices in and then dump this flour into the mixture of egg and sugar and oil and get this to mix in. That way it just allows the spices to be mixed in a little bit better. So let me show you what it looks like once I get one of them mixed in. The other thing you want to do with your flour when you are baking, the best thing to do, if you put your flour in a container, it's going to settle and it's going to get dense. You want to work with fluffy flour, so you want to take it, whether you flop it back and forth in the container before you open the lid to allow it to not be compacted down into your bowl, or you take a fork and fluff your flour, but you want to make sure that your flour is fluffed when you're measuring it. You'll get a better consistency of baking by having fluffed flour. That way your bread won't be too heavy or too light. You'll have enough air through it. A lot of times people have too heavy of bread, too dense of bread or cakes because they're not fluffing their flour and they're using their flour in that compacted state, and you get more flour for what you want when it's compacted. When it's fluffy, you're not getting as much, and the recipe was written to have fluffed or sifted flour. Most recipes are. So the other thing you can do is sift your flour, which will give air through it when you do that, but you don't have to sift it. You can just fluff it by using a fork or by tossing it back and forth in your container if your container is half empty. If it's full, you're not going to be able to, and you're going to have to fluff it, so you might want to scoop some out and put it into another bowl to get it to fluff and then measure it from there. But that's just my suggestion for doing flour, making sure that you fluff it so that it's not so dense and you don't get too much flour for your recipe. Okay, so I have the first batch of flour and spices put in. I'm going to put the second batch. Since I'm doing a double batch, I did it 3 cups, mixed it in, 3 cups, mixed it in. I did mix all of my sugar and eggs and oil all together. One of the things that I do, and I wanted to make a note of this, when I am using frozen, thawed fruit, I tend to cut my oil a little bit, unless you want to drain all of the liquid out of your fruit. But you're draining flavor out of it, because the flavor that is thawed is in, the syrup of your strawberries and the syrup of your raspberries. So what I end up doing is I end up cutting my oil because of the liquid that is in the fruit. If you don't, your bread tends to be really moist and it takes a really long time to cook, and it doesn't ever get completely firm. So that's what I've been doing when I use frozen fruits. I end up cutting my oil by a half a cup, usually, from what it tells you to do. So if it was a cup of oil, I would probably only do a half a cup of oil, depending. You can always add more oil if you think that it's too thick once you add the fruit. You can add the oil into it. It's not going to hurt it. But it's better to have less and add than to have too much and not be able to get rid of it and having to add more flour to soak up some of the oil. So that's where I start with. I cut it by half, and then I add my fruit. And if it feels too firm and it's not runny enough to pour into my things, then I will add some more oil to my bread, because it is supposed to be runny enough to pour into, but not to the point that it looks like a pie runny when you're like making a pumpkin pie that is just really, really runny. It's got to have some thickness to it, otherwise it'll take so long and it won't thicken and cook properly. Okay, so let me get the rest of this flour put in, and then I will get in my fruit. So with the half cup less of oil that I put in, and all of the fruit that I put in there, we have a decent consistency for our bread. It's pourable, but still kind of firm. You want to make sure, like I said, if it was too firm and you couldn't stir it all in, you can easily add a little more oil and mix it in and allow it to be the right consistency. But the last thing you want is it to be really, really too runny and not want to set up, and hard to work with when you're trying to put it into your pans, your bread pans. So now I have 8 little half loaf, mini loaf silicone bread pans on a cookie sheet that I'm going to get put into the oven and let them cook. Now, the recipe says 350 for an hour when it is a 9 by 13 loaf pan. I know it's not going to take that long for mine. I do, however, know that halfway through cooking I need to rotate because the inside piece here will not cook well. So if I pick these up when they're half cooked and rotate them into the center and then turn these ones around since they're connected together, I'll be able to get an even cooking and everything will cook the same way. So I just need to do that one halfway through the cooking time, which I don't know for half loaves. I will put it probably for 25-30 minutes and see where I'm at. And then I can probably 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to see where I'm at and rotate and then go from there. But I will put on the screen here how long it did take me to cook half loaves. But my recipe doesn't say anything about a half loaf. It just says for 2 full loaves. And those are a normal 9 by 13 loaf pan or regular bread pan. Okay, so let me get these put into my pan and into the oven, and then I will show you what they look like. When you're filling your bread pans, you just want to make sure you fill them a little bit over half, not too much because you don't want them to rise too far over the top. You want them to rise up a little bit, but if they get too far over the top of the pan, they tend to flop sideways. So being able to fill them just a little bit over half allows them to rise and have a little bit of a dome at the top of it and it not be too far out of the way. I ended up getting 10. I have 2 other little steel or metal cake or little bread pans. So I have a total of 10 little mini loaves. So I'm going to get these in the oven and I will show you what they look like when they are done. So this is what the rhubarb bread looks like after it has cooked. It cooled. I ended up putting a vanilla glaze on the top of it. So this is how my bread turned out. Looks yummy. Well guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching and learning what I do with my produce that I get from the garden. Rhubarb is one of those fruits that is a unique taste, and a lot of people like it and a lot of people don't like it. It's one of those that you can actually put with a much sweeter fruit and have a really nice savory bread, biscuit, crisp, any of the other things. You can actually substitute rhubarb in all of your fruits, fruit pies, fruit crisp, breads, muffins, anything like that that you normally would make. You can add and do rhubarb to them. There's a bunch of different spices that you need to look into adding or taking away when you're going to add it to breads and stuff like that. But there's a lot of different things you can do with rhubarb. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, I will see you on the next one. Have a good day. Bye.